heard that your parents got divorced around the same time as you were starting a family of your own.
Yeah, it's like a therapy session already.
Yeah.
Yes, my parents got divorced after 35 years of being married, and I was, in my late 20s, early 30, approaching 30, and it was kind of this funny thing of I lived on 3,000 miles. Grew up in San Francisco and lived in New York, and still sort of felt rocked by this thing that my parents were doing, even though it had no practical bearing over my life. I didn't live at home. I lived 3,000 miles away, and I still felt had very complicated feelings about it, and just kind of started thinking about that. And the old title of the movie was Men of Divorce. I always thought about what it was to be a child of divorce, and kind of extrapolated out from that experience, and ended up with this.
So that was sort of the starting point.
That was the starting point, and then there was a bachelor party that my father had asked if he could come on. He was not invited, and fortunately did not attend. But while I was there, I kind of kept imagining what that might be like. And
that was actually in Tulum.
I did go to a bachelor party in Tulum where I kind of started thinking about some of this. And my father is quite different from the character of Peter, but while I was on that trip, was kind of imagining him coming like paragliding in and crashing the party. Yeah.
Always expecting the surprise around the corner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I personally found this film very touching and sincere about separation, loneliness, doubts, masculinity, and kind of tricky family dynamics. People going through different stages of grief, letting go of old relationships. And do you have any? I'm just curious. Do you have any favorite books or films or music on this topic that sort of inspired you to?
Yes, lots. I mean, I feel like all of the great books and movies are about heartbreak in some form or fashion. A book that I was thinking about more and more, that I had read a long time ago, and then while editing it, was thinking about a Philip Roth book called Patrimony, that is sort of about the end of his father's life. And I kind of steal a line from that book in here, where I think Philip Roth said that that you're basically a boy as long as you have a living parent. And that was something I thought about a lot writing it, and also, then in the edit, looking at Peter as a character, and talked to Griffin Dunn, who plays Peter, a lot while filming, kind of that idea that I think he really connected to that idea of I think the same way I kind of had this experience of my parents separating, even though I was a man, brought up all of these complicated feelings. I think he felt like losing his last living parent when he was in his 60s, or maybe late 50s, was another one of these very complicated, things that happens in life where you feel like you're at an age where you should be able to handle things, and yet it still is this, this very challenging moment.
Sure. And this film really takes us through those emotions. The casting here is really terrific, and there's a lot of...
It's actually not. It turns out to not be true a lot of
Was there something going on?
It's at the end. It says that no marriages were harmed during the I've gotten more and more texts from friends who worked on the movie that were kind of like, you really need to change the end of that movie because my marriage has failed. There's been like a dozen.
Going back to the actors, and there's a lot of really good actors in this film, and I'm just curious about your choice of them and what you think they bring to their characters.
Yeah, Griffin was the first person who came onto the project. He was friendly with one of my producers, and he joined the project in its earliest state, before the pandemic. And then the pandemic happened, and it was unclear if we would ever make movies again. So it kind of just turned into a friendship where we would stay in touch over the phone during the pandemic. As you guys may know, our approach in the States was very different than here, so nobody saw each other for a long time. It was sort of terrible, but Griffin and I developed this very kind of nice friendship, and I think by the time the pandemic ended and this project came back to life, it was sort of felt like a gift to be able to reapproach it with this, that wasn't just about the movie. We also had this friendship, and so he was very involved as I was casting, and kind of sent him the people that I was excited about. And it felt like, I think we all were very excited to go make a movie on location after the pandemic. and really wanted to work with
Get
a
out
group
of
of
the States.
people that we would be excited to spend time, that felt right for the movie, and also that felt like we would want to be stuck in on a location with. And so I think with my casting director, who I've worked with before and really adore, everyone I think felt very serious about making sure that it kind of felt like a family and a group of friends.
Mm.
And so that sort of was the first thing that informed it. And then I think there was also this amazing enthusiasm to work with Griffin, who is this sort of amazing hero of American cinema, and has had his ups and downs, and I don't know that he's ever gotten quite the recognition he's fully deserving of. But it was really encouraging casting the movie, like how many people came out of the woodwork who just wanted to be a part of a movie that he was in.
Mm. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. So
great to just see him on
Yeah.
screen again.
Yeah.
Amazing. I very much like the tone of this like very nuanced film, and a lot of it is of course in the script. But I was curious how you, maybe it's a weird question, a tricky question, but how you work with your actors and your creative partners to sort of find that balance between tenderness and humor and drama.
Yeah.
It feels very sensitive
Um,
the way you work.
For better or worse, making a smaller movie like ours, there's not a lot of time to get in your head. You're just kind of trying to make your day. I think what drove things on this movie was that we wanted it to feel truthful. So it was never really about if something felt sad or funny. It was just kind of what felt like how these guys would be behaving in the moment. And so that I think drove it. I felt very lucky to have a partner in Griffin who, I think because he's directed and written, he was keeping an eye on kind of, I think, the overall arc of his character.
Yeah.
And so that was very helpful to me to have somebody who also had their eye on the bigger scope of things. But it was a very scripted movie. There's not a ton of improv in it, but I had some time before we started shooting to rehearse with my actors. And so there was some rewriting that went on kind of once the movie was cast. It felt like I actually did have time on this movie to kind of prepare and re-envision it for each cast member who joined the crew.
Cool. Yeah, you did a great job.
No, thank you.
He did. He really did. It feels like everything. Looking at our program, it feels like it turns out we have quite a few films featuring summer holidays or retreats gone wrong.
Yeah.
From The Royal Hotel to Bad Behavior, How to Have Sex, Swedish documentary Megahertz, and Shame on Dry Land to Rotting in the Sun and this film. There's a lot of personal crises in like these sun-drenched paradises going on.
Yeah.
Do you think a double question? Do you think there's like a White Lotus effect here?
Yeah.
And why would you say Tulum in this case is such a good place for?
It's a good question. And I remember when I wrote this movie before White Lotus came out. And when White Lotus came out, I remember watching the first season, having some delusions of grandeur that I was like, this is going to ruin it's going to ruin my movie. And I think that show was so good. I think also the pandemic, I think it has something to do with how everyone was sort of itching to get out, but also had this anxiety knowing that, that vacation is also complicated. Sure. And I've been showing this movie around, so I haven't gotten to see a lot of these other sun-drenched vacation movies. I think that, for Tulum, the sargassum, all the seaweed on the beach, was a part of the, it was not written into the movie. It was just when we showed up on location, it was there. And at first was incredibly intimidating, and we thought about moving the movie. And then it sort of, kind of embraced it, and it felt sort of perfect. And this, sort of like decay that we're all living through and what's happening to the environment that makes it, sort of impossible to sit on the beach and just enjoy it when you're looking at the sargassum that is taken over the Caribbean coast. I had been to Tulum a few times and I first went probably 12 years ago, and it was kind of the beginning of, it used to be sort of this like beachy yoga retreat, and then it had this wave of kind of like more of a part. It became like a party destination. Sure. And has taken on all of these different lives. And I felt like sort of sadly and ironically, the less desirable it became for me personally as a vacation destination, the better it became for the movie. So I had to apologize to my cast that, like every year you'd be reading all these reports out of Tulum. But it did feel like the perfect place for us to go make this movie.
Sure. It also sort of underlines the loneliness that's in the characters.
Yeah.
Being there on your own when you're out of a long marriage or
and I also
there with a
drink.
Yeah,
and I also felt like the scene, the sort of detour Peter goes on to the construction site was sort of this like it was just sort of surreal and bizarre that a lot of structures like that have gone up overnight exists all over Tulum.
Sure. Do we have any questions from the audience maybe?
Yeah, maybe a question. I just wanted to compliment it was a great movie, and I think you really worked well with the dialogue. To me, that separates a good movie from a bad movie, and so many movies they crash on the dialogue, but you've made a really good job there.
Thank you.
But how do you find it hard to make? It felt natural and real, but also funny and stringent in a way. Do you have anything to say about that?
I think that it's kind of the part that I enjoy the most writing is figuring out how these characters talk to each other, and then in the casting, I think it is usually pretty apparent who makes your dialogue better and who makes it. There are some auditions where you feel like you have to rip up the whole script, and then you'll hear somebody else read it, and all of a sudden you have confidence in what you've written again. And it's sort of what makes the casting process interesting, I think, is how these characters bring a different nuance to it and find something in there that you didn't intend. So I think, I hope I gave the actors a good script, but I do think I also got very lucky with actors who, even just socially, I felt spending a lot of time with these guys. I think we all had a similar sense of humor. And I think that really, sort of saves the day, where it's like if you have that confidence in each other and you're trying something on set and it's not emotional or funny, and you trust each other, you kind of look at each other and know, okay, this isn't working, so we've got to figure out another way in.
Thank you. Great casting.
No, thank you.
You guys
Good.
voice did a good job.
More questions or comments in front of you?
Despite the humor in it, it came across to me as if every character was uncomfortable, pretty much all of the time. There were occasions where they weren't. Is that, first of all, was that deliberate? And secondly, is that a commentary on the New York condition or the modern condition? Or?
It's a good question. I think, for better or worse, maybe a revealing of my experience of moving through the world and some of my friends' experiences. I think especially these guys, we're finding them at a time where they're all going through their own developmental crisis. I think Mickey is trying to figure out what his adulthood is going to look like. Nick, his marriage is falling apart, and I think that's sort of the least of his problems. And Peter, the father, has at once lost his wife, his mother, his father, and his sons have grown up. So I think we're finding these guys at a particularly raw and vulnerable moment, which I think explains some of their discomfort in trying to figure out. I think what intrigued me about Peter is this character who's in his late 60s and yet is having to redefine himself and kind of find out who he is at a point in life where it's, he probably thought that was behind him. And I think that kind of identity crisis trickles down through the generations. I guess it sort of begins with his father sort of hubristically breaking up with his wife after 60 plus years. But I don't know. I think I've always enjoyed movies where there is a large amount of discomfort. And I enjoy that in a movie. I think, I know that when I was in film school and would get excited about a movie and try to show it to my family, they, I think, saw it as sadistic, that I wanted them to sit through melancholia with me or something. It's but I found that experience to be very joyful.
Have your family watched this film?
Yes, they've all seen it. And I think they were all, my first movie, Quitters, is if you think these characters are uncomfortable. So I think I really set a tone with my family. I think they were very relieved that this movie, I think by comparison, had a lot of tenderness. And I think they were pleasantly surprised that I think they were able to watch it as characters in a movie.
Right.
I think it felt like everything had sort of.
And not just see themselves.
Yeah, I don't think it wasn't like this movie had the same. I think they saw a lot of all of us in it, but it wasn't a one-to-one of me trying to portray any one person.
Right.
I think we have maybe time for a question or so if there's some lingering thoughts.
Well, if not, thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you so much.